Good morning. I appreciate you all coming out for the proverbial dawn patrol here. There was some debate as to what time would be the best. And I'll have to admit, I kind of advocated for this earlier slot because, yeah, there you go. Because I'm an early riser. But in any event, my name's Ron Paradise. I work for the City of Deltona Planning and Development Services. And I want to welcome you all to the workshop on the city's comprehensive plan evaluation and appraisal report. I'd like to recognize some individuals in the audience. First of all, we have Mayor Masarczyk, John Masarczyk here. We've got Vice Mayor Chris Novick in the back. And we have Commissioner Anita Bradford here in the audience. Also like to recognize PZ member Stoney Sixma. And last, but certainly not least, City Manager Jane Shang. This show today is going to be run by three individuals from the planning firm VHB. Curtis Aristraka, Tyler Johnson, and Katie Davis. And I'm not going to steal any more of their thunder, and I'm just going to turn the microphone over to Curtis. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Ron. Thank you, everyone, for coming out this morning. As some of you observed, you got the first crack at the donuts, so that was a smart move on your point. And then you can also get out early and enjoy the rest of this beautiful day. So I want to thank again our city managers, our elected officials, and of course the great people that work in the planning department, Danelia and Joe and Ron and Chris Boley, who's going to be joining us shortly. So we're here to help facilitate the beginning of the city's evaluation and appraisal review. So what we're going to do is we're going to give you a short presentation that says, why are we here this morning? What do we hope to accomplish? We want to answer any of your questions or comments, and when we do that, we ask that you use this microphone or come up to the podium here because this meeting is being recorded. So we want to make sure that that the audio can be heard. And then as you go, we're going to do an interactive exercise using these keypad polling items that you received. I see many of you are wearing them around your neck. That's okay. This isn't one of those, if you fall down and get hurt, you can call somebody for emergency help. So make sure you return them when you're done. So, and then after that, we're going to have a break and an open house, so you can talk to any of our team members here about what you heard, and we'll record questions. As you came in, you should have received not only a copy of the presentation, but also a comment form, and we invite you to fill those out. We have a drop box up front next to Katie at the sign-in sheet. Or if you want to take some more time, you can fill it out and then mail it back to us just by putting a staple on it. And we're going to record and receive all those comments up until March 17, which is in about 2 weeks from today, or yesterday. And then what we've done is we split this into two different sessions. So this is the 8:15 session. We're going to give the exact same presentation at 10:15. So you are in no way obligated to stay for both. You are, of course, welcome to if you care to. We have to stay, so we're still going to be doing it. But it's geared for people that couldn't make it to the early session. We don't want them to miss out on the entire day. So, and if we see if anybody stays for the second one, we'll just say thanks for being here. You're a repeat offender. You obviously couldn't get enough of us, and we appreciate you for being here for the second one. Okay, so probably the fundamental question of why we're here is what is a comprehensive plan? So by a show of hands, who here has any experience with the plan or has even heard of the city's comprehensive plan? Okay, a few, great. So this is the document that guides the long-range growth and development of the community. And it's based in several different chapters. Probably the most well-known is what's called the future land use element. And most people recognize that as the map that Tyler is standing next to. And what the future land use map does is it organizes the different land density patterns. It shows where residential development occurs. It shows where commercial development occurs. And over time, The city may change it, or a private landowner may petition to change their future land use in support of a development project. So we're not here today to change the map or any of the colors on the map. We're here to talk about the comprehensive plan globally and what that means for the city of Deltona, because over time, a plan can't just be static. A plan has to be changed and updated over time to stay current with development patterns, with evolving state statutes, and other items. So that's what we're here for today, to begin the update of the comprehensive plan. Now, the comprehensive plan also includes policies for transportation, for housing, for public infrastructure. So we're going to touch on all of those issues as we go through today. But it truly is a comprehensive document that helps the city managers manage growth and development over the city over the long term. So the input for the comprehensive plan comes from meetings like this. This is community visioning, so we can understand what is the will of the people and how would they like to see their community grow over time. So through meetings like this, we fine-tune the goals, objectives, and policies, which are the written direction that staff has to then implement the plan. So we'll talk about some of the potential changes we may look at in the future for the plan. And then amendments are also made by private landowners. There may be an individual who owns a piece of property that they want to change and change from, say, a residential land use to an office land use or a future commercial land use. And so that is permitted by the city, and it goes through a vigorous review process, including public meetings where the applicant would have to come here and state their case to the city commission and have a public hearing for that. So again, I want to emphasize we're not changing the map today. We're talking about the comprehensive plan as a whole. So the plan has a vision, which is kind of the underlying kind of ethos of the community. I just wanted to read back to you in case you had not seen it before, but it's the vision of the community is that Deltona is a premier city that takes pride in our neighborhoods and embraces the diversity of our residents. It's a caring community that provides a high quality of life where people live, work, and play in a safe and secure environment. You have a great appreciation for your history, your location along the St. Johns River, and the purpose of your plan is to ensure a sustainable future through careful stewardship of our resources. So that's kind of the overarching vision that should provide direction for a lot of the policies and goals of the plan itself. So that was a lot of history about what a comprehensive plan is. Now I want to talk about what a evaluation and appraisal review is, which is the current process that we're in. So this needs to be updated or done every 7 years according to state regulations. And that's because, as I mentioned before, state regulations are constantly changing. The economic markets are constantly changing. And so your plan needs to be flexible and adapt to those changes. So that's required every 7 years. And then if, as a community, if you decide that changes to your plan are needed, you need to do what are called year-based amendments or amendments to the comprehensive plan and send them back up to the State Department of Economic Opportunity for review. Again, we're not going to create or approve any amendments today. This is just the kickoff as we start the process. So the last year-based update for the city was in 2010, so 7 years ago. So that's why we're starting this process. We're coming up on our 7-year mark. Many of you may know, but there was in 2011, with Governor Rick Scott being elected, there were some pretty vast changes to the state's Growth Management Act, which was originally enacted in 1985. So when Governor Scott, changed it used to be the Department of Community Affairs to the Department of Economic Opportunity, that gave local governments a lot more control and power over their local comprehensive planning, where there was previously a much stricter state review process. So this is a good thing for cities like Deltona that have very strong planning programs and are able to have very good resources to do their comprehensive planning. So some of the more formal requirements were removed, but the city is committed to still doing a very rigorous evaluation and review process. Our EAR is due to the state in October 2017, so we're moving forward to that. And then should the city decide to make any amendments to the plan as a result of the evaluation and review, that would be due to the state in a year from then, October 2018. So what I want to do is kind of walk you through the process we're going to go through today. What we've done is we've reviewed a number of different documents. Of course, there's the updated state regulations that most of you probably have heard about but aren't intimately familiar with. We want to look at the city's 2015 strategic plan, because that's a big effort you all took upon yourselves, and which we've reviewed it. It looks great, and the next step would be to integrate that into the comprehensive plan. You also had an affordable housing committee that had some recommendations, so we reviewed that. And then we've been working with staff over the last couple months on some of their internal review of the plan and the effectiveness of that. So what Tyler is going to walk through is he's going to walk through these four pieces and provide you all with some high-level information about how those could be tied into the information that we send up to the state. And what these four buckets fall into is our community input component. So that's where we want to get feedback from you all on whether or not you think this is something that's important to your community, and whether or not we would include that in our report to the state. So that's where we'll use our clickers, and then we've got some whiteboards here, and we're going to record any comments you have, as well as those you may have on the comment sheets. And then from there, once we use the community input, we would prepare the EAR letter for submittal up to the state, and then it would go through the EAR-based amendment process. And I've got another flow chart at the end of the presentation that shows the steps that we would go through for that. But for now, I'm going to turn it over to Tyler, and he'll talk about those four buckets and how those may be incorporated into the EAR amendments. And again, we want to get your community feedback on those.
Thank you, Kurt. And once again, I just want to extend another thank you to all of you for being here. Thank you. On Saturday to help us with this. Like Kurt said, this community input is integral in this process of the EAR-based amendments. So starting with the changing state regulations, every year there are a few updates, but the major last overhaul, like Kurt said, was in 2011. A lot of what this did was give more deference to local governments to plan for their future and reduce some of the state regulation process. So there's a expedited state review process for comprehensive plans. That's how the state reviews when a city or county makes an amendment to their comprehensive plan. The way the state agencies review it and comment has been changed. It's also, a lot of the changes were made to encourage innovative planning techniques and strategies, mixed-use development, land stewardship. You can see some there. And one of them is community visioning. So once again, that community input which led to the 2015 strategic plan that the city did. And a couple of big kind of definitions or changes was, one is they removed the financial feasibility requirement of a comprehensive plan. What this said was that for the capital improvements element, so your 5-year schedule of, roadway improvements, adding parks, infrastructure improvements, all of that, there was a required, there had to be committed funding for the first 3 years of those improvements, and then planned funding for years 4 and 5 after. With this update, that's no longer required at the state level. The city's maintaining financial feasibility, and when they look at the capital improvements element of the comprehensive plan, and that aligns with the 2015 strategic plan that I'll talk about in a little bit. But one of the goals of that plan was to, maintain the city's budget and be, financially stable and fiscally responsible. So the city's that has been maintained throughout in the city's comprehensive plan so far. And along those same lines, concurrency requirements meant that improvements for a development needed to be in place at the time of development. So if a new residential development needed turn lanes or a traffic signal, that would need to be installed before the development was finished, I guess. So, and that was for transportation and public schools and on those kind of big public services. And that has been removed once again from the state requirements. But once again, that's been maintained in the comprehensive plan for the city. Cities we work in, some maintain it, some have done away with it. Really, it's all up to the city, and the state wants to allow the cities to keep doing this. And the city so far has chosen to maintain concurrency, to maintain that kind of fiscal responsibility of making sure that improvements are in place. As I mentioned, the strategic plan was done in 2015. The city of Deltona was incorporated in 1995. 20 years later, it was the largest city in Volusia County with 87,000 residents, and that's just growing now. And the city, the staff, and the commission recognized that this rapid growth of the city was something that they needed to look at identifying goals to help deal with the rapid growth and to deal with the increasing population and services. So what they did was they held public workshops and created the strategic plan to look at short-term and long-term goals for the city, how the city wants to continue to develop, and what these goals and policies were. So they identified targeted goals for the short-term planning horizon, which was 10 years. And some of these are here. These were the main strategic issues that came out of the strategic plan. One was economic development. I'll get to this. I'll touch on this a little bit later. The city's staff has been looking at creating a new element of the comprehensive plan for an economic development element. Fiscal issues, like I said, maintaining a fiscally responsible and stable city, and maximizing the funding sources that are available to the city to complete these planning projects and infrastructure plans. Infrastructure, expansion of park facilities and commercial utilities, as well as roadways and trails. Internal and external communication, so customer service, what your experience when you come to City Hall is like, and creating that helpful environment when you come to City Hall. Public safety, providing a quality, high-level public safety services, and social services, looking at creating a wide variety of those services available to the population. And some of the potential ear-based amendments, looking at these goals and how to incorporate them into the comprehensive plan. I mentioned the economic development element. I'll come back to that at the end, and we'll take a look at some of the intents and purpose of that. But as far as infrastructure, to improve multimodal transportation options. Multimodal transportation is, you're not only looking at vehicles, you're also looking at pedestrians and bicycles. So trails, sidewalks, really creating a safe transportation environment for all the users there. And improving transit is one of the options that the city had for this. And another thought was to realign the priorities of how you look at transportation improvements. So instead of just widening a roadway to make it wider and put more and allow more cars that way, but to look at how the roadway operates. Look at maybe signal timing and optimizing that so you create a roadway where the traffic flows better. Looking at turn lanes instead of creating just extra lanes and more pavement on the road. So that changing priorities is something that has been looked at. And then as well as encouraging and improving public facilities to look at new development connecting to the public utilities, so potable water and sewer, and providing that. And one of the things that we were told from staff when we were talking to them was the concern of requiring existing residential development to connect, and that's not something that we're looking at in these ear-based amendments. And finally, we looked at, there's a change to the annexation policy for the city, where if a property wants to annex into the city, they'd have to enter into a utilities agreement with the city to do so. So that's improving the city's services and bringing more folks onto that if they annex in. Also in 2015, the Affordable Housing Action Committee had a series of, I believe it was 11 recommendations that went to the City Commission and were adopted. The Affordable Housing Action Committee was reinstated in 2013, and it was tasked to review and evaluate policies and recommendations relating to affordable housing and community development, specifically to look at enhancing and diversifying the housing options within the city. And they had workshops and public hearings where they went to the commission and presented this and what was adopted. And some of the potential ear-based amendments that we're looking at was to expedite permitting through the city for affordable housing projects, to expand the infrastructure to support those projects, multifamily projects perhaps, but specifically in appropriate areas of the city, to improve multimodal transportation options. You can see there's some synergy between the strategic plan and the Affordable Housing Action Committee recommendations, and to allow for an increased threshold of traffic level of service for affordable housing. Level of service is something that when we look at transportation planning and transportation engineering, how many cars a certain roadway can handle and a percentage of that. And really how the roadway functions, and to increase that for affordable housing in correlation or together with the multimodal improvement in increased transit options was one of the recommendations. And then finally, as Kurt said, we met with city staff and discussed some of the issues that they brought forward as needing updates in the comprehensive plan, and one of these is to streamline and simplify the plan. To make it more predictable for city staff, for city commission, and for any resident who comes in or wants to read the plan or has a question, just to make it more predictable and more streamlined. And part of that involved removing some redundancies. There were a couple of policies were mentioned in multiple sections and referred back to others. So really just, once again, this is along the lines of streamlining, looking at data from 2010 that's in the plan, from the last ear-based amendments that needs to be updated or removed, kind of house cleaning items in here, as well as completed projects. So there were projects in the comprehensive plan that the city completed. They did what they were supposed to do in the comprehensive plan, and those don't need to be there anymore since they're done. The internal inconsistencies, that's along the lines of, if we do make ear-based amendments, we need to make sure that whatever amendments are made or proposed are reflected throughout the comprehensive plan. So you're not proposing a new amendment that then conflicts with an existing policy or objective. And finally, looking at the St. Johns River Water Management District regulations, currently the comprehensive plan lists all the policies and regulations for water management district, and one of the ideas is to incorporate into the policy just to reference those regulations. And since those regulations are changing, if it's adopted into the comprehensive plan, your regulation is then static, and if the water management district regulation changes, your comp plan no longer will be consistent. So this just really puts you're saying the city will comply and be consistent with the water management district, with their regulations. A couple other items that came up were about land use. So one is to prohibit landfills or solid waste transfer stations within the city limits. Currently, I believe they are conditional use or special exceptions where they're allowed in certain areas, but you have to meet you have to apply separately. It's not granted by right. But to prohibit those within the city, and then to revise the residential FLU is shorthand for future land use that Kurt mentioned, and to remove office and retail options within residential neighborhoods. You could still have them adjacent to each other, but just to really look at a residential neighborhood being for residences, and retail and office could be adjacent to, but not within. And finally, I mentioned it a few times earlier, and I'm finally coming back to it, the proposed economic development element. This was from the strategic plan. These are the purposes of it. The city wants to promote and foster economic stability within the city of Deltona. They want to look towards targeting and recruiting specific industries to expand and diversify the economic base within the city. They want to encourage economic development, and I think this is very important, but in appropriately zoned properties. So going back to the industries, but very targeted approach, looking at where it's appropriate to have economic growth and focusing efforts there. The activity center, which is up here at the intersection of Howland and I-4. And finally, to focus on efforts to improve the infrastructure, specifically for those commercial or office properties, so that those services are available. So if a business is looking to locate into the city, they have those services available that they would need to serve their projects. So I think with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Kurt.
All right, thank you, Tyler. So now we wanted to talk about our community input, and we want to get your reactions from what we just presented. But before we do that, we want to do what's called our turning point, or our polling exercise. So this is, believe it or not, this is supposed to be fun. This is not scientifically proven. There's going to be no voter fraud here because this isn't a statistical analysis. This provides us with an indication of whoever was in the room today, what they felt about certain issues. So certainly the City Commission will not make all of their decisions based solely on the voting today, but they may use it as part of their consideration. So what we want to do first, did everybody receive one of these keypads? Okay, Tyler, can you pass those out to those? Okay, Katie's got them. Like I said, this is not statistically valid. This is just to understand what the people in the room had to think about certain issues. And we're going to start with an easy one, just to test and make sure that the system is working okay. So this is a test question. This is whether or not this is who you believe might win the college basketball championship. And Tyler, I thought I asked you to put the University of Illinois as a choice on there. I don't see them up there for some reason. You don't think they're going to make it? Okay. That's my alma mater, and we're not going to beat anyone, so. Okay, as you can see here, we're tracking the number of responses that come in, and I think there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 or so devices that we're looking for responses for. Okay, 11, great. So what this will do is when I hit next, it'll give us a bar chart in real time so you can see the results of what people voted for. This is all anonymous. Don't worry. Nobody's going to know who you voted for to win the national championship. But each keypad does have a little taser on it. So if you walk too far from the unit, it'll sting you in case you try to steal it. I'm kidding. Okay. So did everybody have an opportunity to vote? Okay. Before we move on, I wanted to let you know a little bit more about how these work. You can vote multiple times, but it only records your final vote. So if you think Florida's going to win, but say, maybe I'm going to change my mind, and once I see the seating, it's going to be somebody else, and you pick another vote or another team, that's okay, because only your final vote is recorded. Okay, so any guesses on this before we move on? Okay. A tie between University of Florida and University of Other. Very interesting. Okay, so that was the fun question. Now we're going to move on to some questions where we ask you about the comprehensive plan and what you think about the issues in your community. Because that's really one of the things we're supposed to be doing, helping to scope out what people think what their community issues are, the effectiveness of the comprehensive plan so far, And if you don't know, that's okay. We do have a don't know selection, and that's something we would have a discussion about later. So our first question is, why did you choose to live in Deltona? A, for the residential character, B, for location, C, housing options, D, friends and family, E, recreational options, or F, University of Other. Okay, that was quick. We have our 12 votes in, and would anybody like to provide their last vote, or is everybody ready to move on? Okay, we'll go ahead and move on. Okay, so location, friends and family, and other. So for those of you that said other, could you maybe share why? I was born here. You were born here? Okay. You know, we should have thought of that. Okay. But kind of from what I see from the results, it's about this being a special place. You've got your location being, you know, kind of optimal in the Central Florida region. You have a good friends and family structure, or you were born here. Okay. So what do you see as the major issues facing Deltona? And I know this is hard because we're going to ask you to pick one, but that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to find out amongst the people who are here, what are the shared concerns about what affects Deltona, excuse me. Economic development, transportation, housing, environment, utilities and infrastructure, land use planning, other, or not sure. Here are 12 responses. So economic development was your top issue, followed by transportation and infrastructure. So I think what that tells us is that the economic development element that was prepared by staff, and that's something that we may consider incorporating into the plan, would probably get some support from the community in terms of how you continue to advance your market share. So what type of new development would you give the highest priority? What does this city need more of? And this is related to our future land use element. 9 responses, waiting for, say, 3 more. Okay, 2 more. Commercial development is the most chosen option, followed by parks and open space, and then office and employment. Very interesting. Nobody said we need more residential in Deltona. Okay. Our next question, we may already know the answer to this, but we're going to do it anyway. What type of development has the lowest priority? Same choices, just which one do you think the city does not need any more of? One more. Last call. Okay, and that somewhat mirrors what we saw in the previous slide. Residential being the highest, and then parks and open space, and not sure tied for second. So again, this provides some information for the city planners and the city manager and city commission when they're making land use decisions based on applications. Again, this is another data point for their consideration. Not the sole data point, but just something for them to consider based on what the community who is here had to say. All right. What type of housing is most needed in Deltona? Single-family homes, townhomes, condominiums for sale, or apartments for rent? The way we're doing this is, you can see there's a little box here. These are to help, we have different elements or chapters of the comprehensive plan, so we're walking through them and trying to identify, any changes that the community may want to have for either of them, whether to encourage or perhaps not encourage something. Okay, so it looks like more apartments for rent would be what people here think is most needed here in the city. All right, moving on to the next one. This is also a housing question. How would you rate the affordability of housing in Deltona? A, very affordable, B, affordable, C, affordable but starting to become less so, maybe by market factors, D, not affordable, or E, very unaffordable. Last call? Okay. So affordable, but maybe starting to get less so over time. Okay, very good. So moving on, this is a transportation question. This relates to what Tyler had mentioned about the potential for introducing more multimodal transportation policies. So our question for you is, what does Deltona need more of? Is it A, roadway capacity, so that could be widening the roads so that more cars can drive on them, say go from a 2-lane to a 4-lane road, or a 4-lane to a 6-lane road? Is it more sidewalks so people can walk safely, from place to place? Trails, so that could be something that is, not on the roadway. It could be bisecting, a recreational area. Bicycle facilities could either be on the road as on-street trails, or they could be off-street trails, or none of the above. We did talk about that, and a lot of times people choose all of the above every time, and then we find that it's not as good of a question because it didn't help us narrow down what some of the greater criteria, or the more what am I trying to say? Shared, yeah, exactly. But we're going to record that comment, though. Thank you. Okay, so roadway capacity and none of the above had the most votes there, or responses. I don't want to say votes because they're not really votes. Okay, and we should have had all of the above for this one. Okay, how often do you use the sidewalks or trails in Deltona? Every day, often, sometimes, rarely, or never? Yes, sir. Okay. 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 Yes, I think that would have been a better way to ask the question. Mhm. No, I think the gentleman up front is how often do you walk in Deltona, maybe not just from your front door to your car, but from your front door to someplace else, from, say, your home to the post office, or from your home to the library, or from one store to another store, rather than drive. So you're right. We probably could have worded this a little bit better. It could be both. Sometimes we find that it's not the results of the question, but the discussion we have is most valuable, to help us be informed of what the issues the community has. So thank you for asking. Okay, Okay, so we have our 12 responses. And if you like, we can talk about this. Most people said sometimes or rarely. So why do you think that is, that it's mostly sometimes or rarely? Is it because it's not safe? Is it because there's no place within walking distance to go to? Sir? Okay. Okay. Where would you walk to? Okay. Not enough sidewalks, okay. 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 So I'm going to repeat this since I have the microphone, but not enough places to walk to, an aging population that may not feel comfortable walking, and then maybe the lack of a connected sidewalk to get to these places all the way. Okay. Okay, so kids walking in the street. So even where their sidewalks are. Okay. So the gentleman said that even when sidewalks are available, not all of our citizens choose to use them. Some of our younger demographic will walk in the streets, possibly thinking that they are still invincible. Yes, yes, sir.
They're either on their cell phones or they're driving somewhere, or hopefully not both at the same time.
Yeah. It's interesting because we do a lot of research on this from a community planning and urban planning and placemaking perspective, and both AARP has done a survey that said that their demographics and their constituency are looking for more walkable communities where people don't need to get out and drive everywhere. And then that's also what the millennial generation is demanding, because many of them do not own cars or don't care to, because they want to do those other activities like work, use their cell phone 24/7 and enjoy the nightlife.
Just to kind of go with this and back a little bit, when we talked about, when we asked about what brought you to Deltona.
Yes.
And it was about I chose I forget what exactly was worded, about the character.
Residential character.
Of the city. And when my wife came down here to visit, check it out, and she came back and gave me a report on things, one of the things she just said was, what a difference from up here up in the Northeast. Not everything is asphalt. There are side streets that look like something out of the rural area with no sidewalks. As a matter of fact, where I live right now, the final decision towards living there was the fact it had no sidewalks.
Interesting.
I was just not trying to escape the city. We're looking for a more laid-back lifestyle.
So more laid-back lifestyle.
We came out of O'Reilly, and we moved there, it was a small little sleepy town. When we left there, we still had less than a sidewalk. We came to Deltona, which is quieter, more peaceful on this side of the river. We're starting to build up.
Mm-hmm. It was 45,000, I think, was the population when my wife and I looked into here. And what is that, 80-some thousand?
Yes, with growth projections to over 100,000 soon.
And one and a quarter with the surrounding area, somewhere in that area. I don't know what the exact numbers are now. It's, it expands. And I understand things change. But when you go somewhere, I've been here over 20 years now. When you go somewhere and you look at, what it's all about, and what it's all about was getting away from the city.
Mm-hmm.
If I wanted Orlando, I'd go to Orlando.
So thank you all for sharing. This is exactly the reason why we're having this meeting, because as we mentioned, the plan itself hasn't had a major update since 2010, and a lot has changed since then. So I'm going to move us on to our next question. This also is related to transportation. And how often do you use public transit in Deltona? Every day, often, sometimes, rarely, or never. And take aside we know that the frequency is not high. So just provide your input, and we can have a discussion about kind of the ridership and the frequency of routes later. Okay, looking for 2 more responses. I don't think anybody left yet. 1 more. Okay, well, I'm going to go ahead and close it then so we can keep moving along. A high degree of never and sometimes. And, my wife used to work for Lynx, so I'm pretty familiar with the difficulties that public transit has here in the state of Florida. And, that's not an uncommon sight to see that most people never take the transit either. It's not convenient for them. It only comes every hour or 2 hours. There's no safe place to be in terms of shelter, because oftentimes it's just a post without a shelter, without any shade. So if it's going to rain, you're out of luck. And a lot of times these the transit agencies just don't have the resources to provide better service. And probably one of the other reasons is we just don't really have the population density in most of our Florida communities to support increased transit service. Yeah. This is one that Tyler mentioned earlier. Should the city maintain the financially feasible definition in the comprehensive plan? Now, as we told you, the state used to have this requirement. They have taken it out of state statutes. The city has chosen to keep it, though, because that was part of the city's strategic plan in order to remain financially smart. But that definition is that for any capital improvements, within the comprehensive plan, you have to show committed funding sources for the first 3 years and planned funding for years 4 and 5. And basically that means you submit what could be a balance sheet. And it says for this road widening, in order to meet level service standards, we're going to use our general fund to fund it for the next 3 years. And then years after that, we may seek a grant or something like that. And the reason we're asking this question is because it's not required anymore. It's a local decision. It's whether or not you believe that the city should keep this definition in the plan itself. We may have one abstaining still, so I'll move us forward with 11. And most people said yes, but a couple were not sure. So I think it's still a discussion item that we're going to have over the next course of this project. Okay. Should the city require new development to connect to public utilities? So that would be potable water and sanitary sewer. And another way of asking this would be, should the city require, or should the city prohibit new development from using septic?
If it's available.
If available, okay.
If it's available.
Yeah.
Yeah, it should say if it's available.
Okay.
Because there's a lot of areas in our city where we do not have public services yet, but developments are going in. So it'd be totally impractical for them to put in $500 million worth of sewer lines to get out to where they're at.
Yeah, we can modify that. Our 12th person came back. Great. Okay. Yes, and is that if available for the most part?
Yeah.
Okay. the old when practical. Okay. Does the city have adequate parks and open space? Now, within our parks and open space element, there's usually there's what's called a level of service standard, and it says you got to have one basketball court for every 500 residents, so, kind of metrics like that. Got to have 2 acres of park for every 10,000 residents. The majority says yes, some say no. So that's something that I think we would want to evaluate as we go through the next round of the plan. And if it's found that the parks and rec open space isn't adequate, then perhaps when you update the plan, you would increase the requirements for new development. But most people seem to think there's already adequate space. Is the comprehensive plan adequately protecting the environment? Now remember that the plan has already adopted all of the St. Johns River Water Management District criteria into the plan. The reason Tyler recommended removing the exact criteria was that provides more flexibility because what you're doing is you're referencing the state requirements rather than having them in your plan. If the state requirements changed and you still had the old requirements in your plan, you would have to amend the plan, send it up to the state and back. So it takes 3 months or so before you'd have a determination on whether or not you can change that. But we're just trying to understand in general, do people think that the city's plan does a good job of protecting the environment? Okay, with our 12th response. Not sure. I think that's fair to say. This is kind of a tough question.
I think it's too broad.
Too broad. Okay.
Because you're talking about the environment, but on the same token, you're limiting it to the St. John's water management system.
Okay.
There's many other aspects of the environment. So.
Okay. So maybe if we were able to have a follow-up, we could dig into the different criteria, whether it's floodplains, wetlands, something like that, in a little bit more detail to provide staff with some greater input there.
I think for me, I have no idea what's in the plan in terms of environment. I've not read it, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know what provisions are in there or not in there.
Right. And most people haven't read it all the way.
After much digging, I found it. Make note of that. After much digging, I found it.
Okay, on the city's website?
Well, thank God for Google.
Right.
Because through the website now.
Well, I thought it went before the website.
I couldn't find it at all.
I mean, I've got it right here. I just haven't read it. It's a long document. It's a lot in there.
Well, we're working on the streamlining of that to make it a little bit more user-friendly. Okay, this is an intergovernmental coordination question, and this is based on your impression. How would you describe the coordination between the city and the county? And I think this is most relevant in that, that northwest corner where you have a joint planning area. So good or great, good but could be improved, needs improvement, non-existence, or not sure. Needs improvement gets the most of the responses, followed by not sure. Okay, and then I think this is one of our final questions. Should the city include an economic development element in the comprehensive plan? This is an optional element. It's not required by the state. I think about 1/3 of the communities in Florida do have one, but not all have found it necessary to do so. You saw that there was, that was a recommendation from the strategic plan, and so our question is, do you believe that should be carried through into the city's comprehensive plan? So we're waiting on 2 more responses.
I just have a question.
Yes, sir.
Before I answer. If the state agrees with the comprehensive plan, but they don't necessarily agree with the economic development element component of the comprehensive plan, can they reject the comprehensive plan?
In my experience, I've never seen the state reject an economic development element. The state in the past has been more concerned with future land use and with transportation and environmental. So it's not been my experience that they've ever had an issue with an economic development element.
Okay.
For one more? All right. Yes, no, a couple not sure, but the majority here responded in the affirmative. Okay. And then these are goals from the strategic plan, and we are curious which has the greatest priority, in your opinion, to promote and foster economic stability and development in Deltona. And the first one is to pursue target businesses and industries. The second is to encourage economic development of appropriately zoned properties along the major thoroughfares and the activity center. C is the improvement of infrastructure. And D is none of the above. And sorry, Mr. Vice Mayor, we didn't include all of the above because we're trying to get to a priority here. Because we would all, I mean, a lot of times we would love to do everything at once, but staff needs to be able to prioritize. You need to prioritize funding as well. Okay, two more. So the first one got the most responses. So that's pursue target businesses and industries to provide diverse economic opportunities, followed by the development of appropriately zoned parcels along the major thoroughfares and activity center, and then followed by none of the above. So out of curiosity, those that said none of the above, is there anything from an economic development standpoint that you might encourage the city to look at? Okay, not sure. That's okay. Okay, so that concludes our keypad polling, and we'll make sure we collect those when we're done so you don't get that nasty little shock on the way out. So what we're going to do is we're going to have a question and answer period. We've already had a great dialogue, and we've recorded all those comments so far, and they're all going to make it into the meeting record. But what I want to do before we get that, just in case people don't stay for the whole time, I just want to talk about what the next steps of this project are. So we're over here off the screen. We're having our kickoff meeting here, our public workshop. The next step is to take all that input that we've received from both this session and the session that starts at 10:15, compile that into a report, and that goes to, I think we're going to have a joint meeting with our Planning and Zoning Board and our City Commission, and we think we're going to have that meeting probably in May. And there'll be notification for that. These are all public meetings. Following that, staff would work on, we would help staff submit our document to the State Department of Economic Opportunity, no later than October 2017. We think we're going to be done well ahead of that, so we won't be running late on that. And then if, as a result of this meeting and direction from our planning board and our city commission, if at their direction some amendments, perhaps some of those that Tyler had mentioned, are going to be included or are determined to be necessary. We talked already about some of the changes to state statutes we need to account for, the need to streamline, the need to remove some of the redundancies. So I think it's safe to say there will be amendments. That'll be done after the state says that they've received and accepted the EAR, and we would have to make those amendments within 1 year, and then do a transmittal hearing probably in October 2018 or before. And all of these would include, public input. There would be a public meeting to discuss the potential amendments. And then in order to have a transmittal hearing, it would first have to come to the planning board for a public meeting, and then to city commission again for the transmittal hearing. And then within, say about 3 months adoption hearing. So we're just saying first quarter of 2019. And that would be the new updated comprehensive plan. And that would give us another 7 years before you have to come to one of these meetings again. Although we hope that you continue to participate in your government as much as possible. So with that, we want to take any questions or comments you have. And I'm going to hand you the mic so everybody will be able to hear you if that's okay. Oh, of course.
See, it is written, seek first the kingdom of God and all his righteousness, and all these things should be added unto you. You can put his wisdom, seek God's wisdom in making any plans. It's relevant because we need to make the right choices, and he knows the whole plan before we do. So for every city, for every state, every state of this United States of America, and I have a little prayer that comes from Psalm 91, a prayer of protection. I pray for the city of Deltona. It says, Father, I praise you that Deltona dwells in the secret place of the Most High and shall remain stable and fixed under the shadow of the Almighty, whose power no foe can withstand. I will say of you, Lord, the Lord is Deltona's refuge and fortress and God, for on him it leans and relies, and on him it confidently trusts. And he will deliver Deltona from the snare of the fowler, from the deadly pestilence. He will cover it with his pinions, his feathers, and under his wings it will trust and find refuge. And your truth and your faithfulness are a shield and a buckler to Deltona. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am, for your contribution. Does anybody else have any comments or questions about the plan or the processes we're going through? Like I said, we'll be recording everything. You have your comment cards. We're certainly not going to hold you here if you know the group collectively decides that we've completed our business.
No, I just wanted to add, maybe like ask the city manager to get that system for our commission meetings to make our jobs a lot easier. Then the audience could just hit the buttons over whether they like what we're doing or not.
Are you sure you want that, John?
Well, I figured that we wouldn't need to be here after a meeting or two. They'd just tell us all to leave.
I didn't think that was an option.
I don't know if we're supposed to make any comments or not today, but hearing that the public's, I don't think, has any more. I just wanted to ask a couple of questions. Is there a requirement from the state to incorporate into these comprehensive plans now anything that deals with a vulnerability study in terms of sea level rise? Mr. Paradise and I attended a TPO meeting yesterday, and there's an element around the state to take into consideration on many fronts: transportation, sewer lines, water lines, and so forth, not just coastal areas. Because if you look at, we're on the St. Johns River on the south end of the city, a change in sea level rise of just a foot over the next 50 years would impact how the St. Johns River flows. And that's based on a study right out of Stetson University here in DeLand. So if there's not a requirement by the state to incorporate that, I would suggest we look at that element, because it will affect all the key components that we talked about in the comprehensive plan today. And it would start with a vulnerability study to look at and then develop resiliency planning and sustainability of the plan. The second comment would be, again, this is tied to several elements. It probably would fall under transportation as a subcategory, but I think we directly should include in the plan something that looks at sunrail. Deltona has a workforce of 48,000 people. We put the most amount of cars
on I-4 on a daily basis between here and Orlando. And when the subsidy runs out for Sunrail in just a few years, it's going to fall on Volusia County, Seminole, Orange, and the city of Orlando to pay what the ridership is not paying for. Deltona, I believe, holds the key to Sunrail being successful or not successful, and it definitely falls into the transportation element. So I would look at adding something specifically under the public transportation element dealing with Sunrail and how our comprehensive plan should address that element. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And Ron, does the plan currently have any Sunrail specific policies?
No, not
Okay.
right now.
So that's something we would probably want to look into.
Yeah, I mean, the Sunrail was just a discussion the last update. You know,
Right.
Obviously, there's transit-oriented provisions within the plan that could be obviously applied to Sunrail. But
Okay, so that's something that with staff we can look at as an additional or a new policy of the plan. And then back on your first point, Mr. Vice Mayor, I am not aware of any state requirements for a vulnerability assessment, although I believe they encourage all local governments to do it. Now, there are what are called coastal high hazard areas that prevent or restrict development rights within a area that's, I believe it's called the slosh model. So that's the first part of where sea level can rise. And I'll review the plan to see if you have that in there. I admit that I'm not aware if that's in there today, but that is one of the state requirements to be aware of coastal high hazard areas, and I believe that would include, flooding for rivers as well. So thank you for bringing those up.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Okay, 2 points. Number one, on business development. When I've attended the meetings, most of the comments I've been hearing was bringing in national chains or large, better-known businesses into Deltona. Why not target small local businesses? They don't have the same requirements as a corporate headquarters will do. Also, I understand that when you have a local business, the profits from the local business stays in our community 10 times longer than if it goes to a national chain. So if we can target small local businesses that will develop and grow here, that'd be great, especially the foods and small retail businesses. Second one, on transportation. Loop systems or trolley system like they have up in St. Augustine would be great, especially if you have family passes or long-term passes to make it more affordable. My daughter has 4 kids. She drove the bus once and it ran her broke. I'm paying for each person individually. So we've got to make it affordable as well as convenient. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Thank you again. And Katie, you recorded all this? Great, thank you. Any other comments? Well, please take the opportunity, if you have any other thoughts, to drop off a comment card, or you can take several of them with you and give them to folks that weren't able to come today. You can mail them back to us. We'd like to receive them by, I think it was March 17, in order to keep the project moving forward, because we have a reporting requirement. And of course, please continue to attend your city meetings, and because everybody on council and from the management, city management, they want to hear from you. It's, this is community visioning and how we develop, keep our mission statement of making sure that Deltona remains a great place to live. So if that's all, thank you very much for coming this morning. Feel free to grab a donut on the way out, so those people who came for the later one will regret it. Thank you very much. And we're happy to answer any individual questions after this.